Welcome, Parsa. Thank you for being in the Heliosphere.
Hey Kevin, thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. You've been recently voted as busiest man in Dublin.
Oh, really?
So it's really nice that you are here.
What a surprise.
Talking of which, you are very busy because you have a really interesting business in the tech space, in the AI space. Maybe we'll just start that you briefly talk about how your job overlaps with social media.
Sure.
And how you work with social media, both on the technology side, but also maybe on other sides in your life.
Sure, sounds good. So we are a startup. We have built technologies that help businesses understand what's going on in the world through the lens of analytics, and particularly text analytics. So we take any document, any piece of text, and try to make sense of it in an algorithmic and automated way. And this is primarily used by companies who want to gather insights about, either the market or their competition, or risk factors, risk events happening out there. And I suppose a big aspect of that is understanding what consumers are thinking and talking about, which obviously derives things like marketing and I suppose understanding of market and so on. So the area where our business overlaps with social media is where companies come to us and they're interested in monitoring public Twitter accounts of individuals, companies, etc., grabbing all the status updates that they publish, aggregating all of those in one place, and then applying our technology to it to extract valuable insights from it. So
what does typically happen with those insights? Like, after you identify certain interests or patterns, what do your customers then typically do?
Right, so there's a range of things that they do depending on what they're interested in, but if let's say you're a consumer brand, you're a phone manufacturer and you make smartphones, you've just released the X Phone X and you want to gauge people's reaction to it. One way for you to do that at a large scale is to just go on Twitter, find all the tweets that mention X Phone X after the release, and analyze the surrounding context, right? Understand how people are feeling about the X Phone X. What are the aspects that they seem to be positive about? What are the aspects that they seem to be negative about? Are they unhappy with the price but they really like the device, or are they happy with the screen but they don't like the battery life? Those are the types of insights that you can very efficiently and very quickly gather if you look at the tons of content that's out there on social media.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. And in relation to your personal life, like, obviously, similar to me, it's very interesting because we both work strongly in social media related technologies. So do you feel that your knowledge of social media and how your, let's say, how your awareness and understanding of how social media is used has led to changes in how you personally use social media?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very, very interesting viewpoint. But knowing what companies can extract from my posts on social media, and knowing what for business purposes or other kinds of purposes, knowing what governments can extract from my posts on social media, has definitely given me a sort of awareness around what I should and shouldn't post online. So I'm really cautious about that. Most of it is probably not very conscious. It's just on one hand that it's possible to extract these types of insights from what people post online. On the other hand, you obviously have things like Cambridge Analytica and so on, all the things that have happened around those types of use cases, using social media as a way to influence elections and understand people's political interests and so on. And when you combine those, it's pretty obvious that this type of stuff is now possible, and any individual, I think, should be at least aware of these type use cases, that this can be done to their data, and then act on it. So if they're not firstly, if they're not uncomfortable, or if they're not comfortable with these type outcomes or this type use cases, they should have the control to limit who can and can't access their content. And number two, there should be transparency in the first place about who has access to my content, how they're able to use it, for what purposes, and so on, from the social media companies as well. So if you go and sign up to Facebook, do you have the full transparency around what's going to happen to every status post you upload or you put on the site? Who has access to it? Who can use it for what purposes? What's the background of those companies, and so on. So yes, absolutely. So being in this business and just being generally aware of technology has made me, as a consumer, much more conscious about how I use social media platforms.
And how does that, like, specifically, what would you say has changed? Like, have you
in my behavior? So
yes, just like certain information you would then not share because that's maybe something I wouldn't want to share.
Yeah,
or?
yeah. Well, for one, I do interviews like this less. No, but I suppose on a day-to-day basis, I am much more of a kind of passive or active. It doesn't have to be passive necessarily, but I'm more of a consumer rather than producer on most of these social media platforms. So if it's Twitter, for example, I follow a certain number of accounts that I know and trust and I'm interested in. And 90%, 95% of my use case for Twitter now is just opening my Twitter app, checking what those people have published, and maybe like diving a little bit into like the Explore tab or the equivalent of the Explore tab to see what's slightly outside my filter bubble that I might not be exposed to. Same on Instagram. Really, my Instagram profile is private. I only have like a small group of people that I know there. On the sort of producer side, so that's like there's only maybe 300-400 people that see what I post, but I follow loads of accounts that I find interesting. So there, I suppose that kind of 10-to-1 ratio of consumer to producer is there for me. So for every 10 posts that I see, or even for every 100 posts that I see, I probably post one post or one image.
And is there something in basically in the limitation of your behavior that you would say that you would like to actually have, or you're missing? So is there like maybe a potential vision or version of social media where you say, oh, actually this is something I would like to be able to do, but I'm not doing it because of certain aspects of how it is designed now?
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, good place to start might be what are the things that I don't like about the current state of these platforms, and why I mentioned that some of those use cases, for political or commercial purposes, worry me as a consumer. But if you look kind of deeper into that, there are things like advertisement, right? So that's the first place to look at probably for most people. So there are tons of experiments now that show, if you're talking about Game of Thrones and 5 minutes later you go on Instagram, the first ad you see might be related to Game of Thrones. That's something that really, spooks me out. It spooks out a lot of people. I don't think I'm the only one. And that I don't really like. I feel like that's an invasion of my privacy. I do understand the concept of showing ads that are not just ads and generic, things that are more like recommendations rather than ads, that where the platform or the provider of that service or product comes to me and says, you definitely will like this, but we're far from that from a state of technology in advertisement. So that's one category. Like, I'm not comfortable with the ads, so I'm one of those people who's willing to pay €5, €10 a month and have the ads completely removed. I don't mind about seeing the ad itself, because after a while, obviously your eyes and your mind are very good at like filtering it, so I probably don't even see it. The problem is knowing that my data is getting exploited for ads. That would be one of the key things that worries me about like putting more and being more active. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I suppose, is the reason why I may not make my social media profiles public and produce more content publicly there's a certain, I think it's probably more psychological. It's a new, like, our ancestors never had to deal with this issue. The total number of people that ever saw heard about their thoughts and and emotions and so on was probably in the lower hundreds of people in their whole lifetime. But now suddenly, if I post something out there, it might get 5,000 views, and all sorts of people from all around the world. And it's just, I suppose, at a psychological level, it's something that we're not really prepared for, and nothing has really prepared for us for this kind of this level of exposure. So that alone, this constant feeling of, oh, you're in front of a 10,000 person crowd when you're posting something online, and that it may not be true. Those people probably don't care. They're probably too caught up in their own lives to care about what I post on social media. But there's always this like constant pressure and this perception that if I post something stupid, or if I post something that's too private, or something that my average follower will not like, even though I'm not an influencer, I shouldn't care about that. But that's still there, because if I consider my followers, there's friends, there's family, there's people from different countries that I've lived in the past, from my home country, and from other countries that I've lived in. So all like different contexts, and it's hard to if I'm talking to only one category of people from like one certain region or one a specific community, it's a lot easier for me to publish something for that community. So if I had more control over like segmenting my follower base and saying, okay, these are friends from back home, this is the kind of stuff I'm comfortable sharing with them, and these are my work friends, and this is what exactly. So adding that context, I think, would be another thing. So ads and context, I would say.
There's a lot of research around that. Like there's a lot been done. Google Circles was a nice idea.
Right. Exactly.
We had that idea, but it was just too hard to maintain. So from a technology perspective, we would want the algorithms to automatically understand what the contexts are, and not that we have to start labeling and customizing.
Exactly. Partly that, but partly also I think why Google Circles didn't fail, or it failed and didn't work, was because it was built on top of a foundation being Google Plus that wasn't working. But something like Instagram is already working. Can it now kind of extend into that context layer and add things like, so I mean, there are some basic controls now in Instagram, which is interesting. You can specify a single group as your close friends for that same exact reason, I believe. And then you can block your posts from certain people, but that's still like not, it's very coarse still, it's not very granular. I can't create multiple groups and decide what to share.
Just going back to the commercials, obviously that's really interesting, because that's also the space you work in as a CEO of a startup. So assuming that the advertising model is too intrusive, and the advertising model actually combats or in some way hinders privacy and more useful scenarios for social media, can you imagine any other ways to make this technology work, to cover the costs, to pay the technology, and still be feasible? Like, obviously subscription is an interesting one. Spotify, Netflix, they all go on subscription. So could you imagine paying $50 a month for Instagram, or maybe there's other models? I don't know.
Right. Well, I'm a big fan of the subscription model. I would definitely pay not 50 euros. I think.
Would you have a number in your head? Like,
I think the highest I would go, and I don't know if this is because Netflix is $7.99, but that's probably the highest I would go.
But you would do
I would
that.
kind of assign an equal value.
So if it takes away the advertising model, you would pay like
I would pay
about
$10
a month.
Up to $10. I think I'd be comfortable paying.
So there's enough value in there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Nice. And so that's Instagram specifically. I'm also, I used to use Facebook quite a bit. Like many people, I've abandoned Facebook for like posting updates or checking updates. I mainly use the Messenger now. Most of the updates for me are through Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. I'm a big user of Reddit, but Reddit is not exactly a social, well, it's in some ways a social media as well. But most of my messaging and more private stuff is on Telegram, because I trust their encryption and their, I suppose, the people that are behind it as well. And it's like a relative trust, right? I don't have absolute trust in them, but compared to X and Y and Z, I just trust them a little bit more.
It's interesting because WhatsApp is end-to-end as well.
Right, yes, end-to-end encryption,
So what's the difference then?
Just the notion of it being owned by Facebook, I suppose.
And how does Telegram finance their model? I don't know.
Well, so yes, they're also a private company, but it's just, I suppose some of it is not putting all your eggs in one basket. So I do think from that perspective as well. So like use a phone made by Apple and like have your email on Gmail and I don't know, use Telegram for messaging. I don't like to use an Android phone and have a Google account and also like use Google Plus for my social networking. I don't like that idea of having all my data with one company. I think it just reduces the risk for me to like have chunks of my data spread across different platforms, because one way or the other your data will end up with one of these big players. But I just want to diversify it a little bit as much as is in my control and I can. But at the end of the day, it's always this question of privacy versus convenience, right? So will I abandon a service purely because I don't like their privacy model?
And you personally would say convenience or privacy? What's a stronger?
I'm a pragmatic person. I probably have a lower privacy sensitivity threshold than many people. But that being said, I think I would pick convenience over privacy 7 out of 10 times. Let's put it that way.
Well, that's what most research says as well. That's definitely the case.
I would guess.
But it's interesting that you would pay for the subscription, because most people say they would not.
Right.
And then there's no advertising, no subscription. So how is this supposed to be paid?
Exactly. I mean, it's either this or that. Or something else.
But any other ways you could imagine a commercial model, maybe a co-op, or I don't know, maybe there's different.
So I suppose ultimately, like if you think really in abstract terms, I think. If what I'm posting has information, like it has some new information about the world, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be that I'm eating pizza and I'm the only person who knows that I'm eating pizza. So there's some inherent novelty in that information. If I could monetize that wherever it goes, like it doesn't matter if it's on a social media platform, but just this bit of there are a number of bits that can describe the fact that I'm eating a pizza. If I could have ownership over those bits, and each time it's used for any purpose, I get some money back, then maybe that could be a viable business model as well, because it doesn't obviously stop with the social platform. So if you post it on Twitter, journalists, probably it's not a very high chance, but some journalists might find it interesting and embed that tweet in their blog post, and then another person could come and see that content and write another piece based on, partly based on my tweet, for example. So in that case, it would be interesting to see if I had a way to monetize that, and if the platforms that help me propagate that message could also take a cut out of that.
Well, a potential version, I mean, that's an interesting thought that's been spun around now for a while, are these decentralized platforms.
Right.
And which means cutting out the middleman. So if we take the typical social media model, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, there's always a big server in the middle, a centralized server that negotiates a price for promoted content between the user and the producer. So if you cut out the middleman, it's closer to what you said, where you as the content creator and owner directly negotiate the price with the content consumer. It's interesting though as well, because from a technological perspective, if there's no server and it's a decentralized platform, and the question is, where is the technology, or where is what is it? But there's a lot of concepts now looking at that to somehow promote these decentralized structures.
Well, I think that's ultimately the way all data should go. I don't know if we have all of the technology yet, but I suppose what it really conceptually boils down to, again, is this idea of I have access to some new information. There might be other actors that take this information, enrich it. So in our case, for example, we take a social media update and we add a sentiment tag to it using our NLP and machine learning models, which says if this is positive or negative, right? So we added a little bit more information to that original information. And then we might pass it on to the next vendor who takes the image out of the tweet and analyzes the image and adds a set of additional tags and says, this is about such and such brand, or they're eating such and such product. So they're adding their bit of information to the whole package, and it kind of snowballs and grows, and who knows, like maybe an advertisement company uses it down the line, maybe a financial services company uses it to make a trading decision, whatever it might be. If you had a clear path or clear way of chasing this, just like blockchain technology, you know, the way that you can, you know, kind of maintain the original information and add to it in a decentralized fashion. I think that would be a very interesting, like from a technological perspective, it would be a very interesting model, but does it align with commercial needs and commercial goals? That's the bigger
it's
question.
Always the challenge. Yeah, just to finish off, if, let's say, in a utopian kind of vision, anything's possible, what kind of social media future would you want for the world?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean,
it's like it's Christmas. You can whatever you
wish
want.
Whatever you want. So, firstly, it's the medium.
Be careful what you wish for.
Firstly, it's well, I mean, I'm a technologist, so
yeah.
any scenario is good with me, as long as it relies on technology, but or is enabled by technology. But I suppose, yeah, I mean, going back to what we discussed earlier, so this idea of context is really important to me. The ads to go away, replaced by a subscription fee, is important to me. And also the medium through which you consume and interact with the social media platform. Obviously, you know, smartphones are great technology, but they're still, you know, they're clunky and you have to, you know, scroll and type and tap and all of that. So I'd like to kind of see more advanced mediums like, you know, VR type technologies. And you know, if you try to initiate a phone call or a conference call now, my experience is that, you know, the first 5-10 minutes is always wasted on figuring out how to like connect all the people and have everyone in the same virtual conference room and so on. So I'd like to kind of see the medium also improve and make it easier for me to interact with other people. Because I think at the end of the day, that's what's great about social media, enabling me to interact with people that are not physically close to me. So
nice. Great, thank you.
Okay.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Time.